As they came out one by one, the details of beloved comedian Phil Hartman's infamous death stunned fans. But his friends knew the truth, and the identity of the celebrity that they blamed sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Everyone seems to have a favorite Phil Hartman character. After all, there are so many to choose from. SNL's anal retentive chef, The Simpsons' Troy McClure, or even morally reprehensible Bill McNeil from News Radio. What people don't want to think about is Hartman's sad and untimely death. It seems to have come quite randomly, and as if out of nowhere. But did it really? Let's follow the facts and see how, with one quick decision, Hartman's life suddenly seemed destined for a tragic and gruesome conclusion. Phil Hartman was number 4 in a string of 8 children. He was born on September 24, 1948, in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. As a child, Hartman felt a little lost amongst all his siblings. He later said that he craved attention, and when his parents didn't have time to give it to him, he found it in other ways, by being funny. The entire Hartman family made a big move from Canada to California, where they lived in L.A. Here, Hartman attended high school and got a reputation as the class clown. He also involved himself in drama classes. He appeared in plays at Orville Wright Junior High, and one of his co-stars ended up being famous. Or infamous, I should say. Hartman shared a stage with none other than Lynette Fromm. You may know her as Squeaky, the Manson family member who tried to shoot Gerald Ford when he was president. When he graduated, Phil Hartman started up at a community college. He studied graphic arts and soon was combining his love of design and rock music. This resulted in Hartman designing album covers. Hartman, however, wasn't content to be behind the scenes. He wanted to be famous. Hartman's first stop on the road to getting himself noticed was to be on the dating game. The audience loved him, and so did the female contestant, who chose him for her date. Once he'd tasted the thrill of being loved by an audience, he wanted more. After winning the dating game, Hartman poked around looking for an outlet. He wanted to perform but didn't know how. He stumbled upon the Groundlings, which was an improv group that had launched the careers of many Saturday Night Live members. Hartman was just a student of the group, but he often attended the live performances. One evening when he was in the audience, he had an epiphany. He thought he was ready to join the actors on the stage, so he just got up and joined them. But it didn't quite go as planned. They sent him back to their school for more training. But there was just one problem. He couldn't afford it. So in exchange for classes, Hartman worked his magic as a graphic designer. He redid their logo and helped them merchandise their brand. It paid off because they invited him back on stage, and within a couple of years, he was an audience favorite. While performing with the Groundlings, Hartman met Paul Reubens. The two started to work together on comic bits, and through this collaboration, they gave birth to the bizarre character Pee Wee Herman. The Groundlings thought that Pee Wee Herman was a blast, so they gave him the stage at midnight. Reubens was Pee Wee, and Hartman appeared as Captain Carl and Monsieur LeCroc. The Pee Wee Herman Show was a spoof of children's TV shows, and the audiences loved it. It wasn't, however, only audiences that thought the show was hilarious. Executives at HBO happened to come to a midnight performance of the Pee Wee Herman Show and loved it. The network decided to tape one of the live performances and then put it on the air. This was the beginning of a crazy ride that would make Paul Reubens incredibly famous. While Hartman was one of the creators and had a character of his own, it was hardly going to put his face on the map. In fact, at this time, Hartman was questioning his career choice. Would he ever be a famous performer? By 1982, Phil Hartman was on his second marriage. The first had been in the early 1970s, and this one was with Lisa Strain, a real estate agent. In 1985, Hartman and Strain got a divorce. Strain later told the dark details of their relationship in an interview. She told People magazine that the problem with their marriage was that Hartman tended to disappear emotionally and be in his own world. He added that this behavior made her crazy. As we'll soon see, this wasn't the only wife of his that felt crazy around him. While he was questioning being a performer, Phil Hartman got a role in a movie. In Cheech and Chong's next movie, both Rubens and Hartman had cameos. But still, this small part wasn't about to make Hartman into a star. Later, when Rubens wanted to make a movie, he got Hartman on board as one of the writers of 1985's Pee-wee's Big Adventure. While it must have been fun working on this film, it had Hartman away from the camera instead of in front of it. This wasn't his career plan, and he'd do anything he could to change it. In 1986, CBS became interested in Pee-wee Herman. They had an idea to make the Pee-wee Herman show, which was a fake children's show, into an actual children's show, which makes you wonder if CBS didn't quite get the joke. Ultimately, it didn't matter. CBS wanted Pee-wee, and wherever Pee-wee went, Hartman went too. It seemed that the two would be together as long as Pee-wee Herman was successful. Or maybe not. Opportunities to appear on a big show like Pee-wee's Playhouse were few and far between. On the outside, it seemed like a big break for Hartman. But behind closed doors, things were falling apart at the seams. Hartman and Rubens had intense creative differences, and eventually it grew to be too much for Hartman, and he walked away. SNL creator Lorne Michaels auditioned Hartman and welcomed him to the show in 1986 for the 12th season. Hartman had a plan. He wanted to use SNL to gain exposure to a wider audience. Then he could go on to write and appear in his own movies. So SNL was supposed to be a temporary means to an end. In the end, Phil Hartman really did go down in Saturday Night Live history. The website, Grantland, was looking to name the best SNL cast member of all time. The winner of their online poll put Will Ferrell in the #1 spot, but they were quick to mention his only competition, Phil Hartman. During his first year with SNL, Phil Hartman went on a blind date with swimsuit model Bryn Omdahl. Omdahl was sober when she met Hartman, but she hadn't always been. Omdahl's beauty blinded Hartman, and he wasn't able to see any of the warning signs. They got married in 1987, and the countdown to tragedy began. One day, Hartman was filming an opening credit sequence for Saturday Night Live, and he asked Omdahl to sit opposite him for the filming. When Omdahl noticed that she wasn't in the shot, she got angry with the director. Hartman saw his wife's need to be on camera and tried to help her. Sadly, even Hartman couldn't use his connections to get Omdahl into an on-camera role. The consequences were brutal. When she'd had enough of failure, she sadly turned to the bottle. Instead of pacifying Omdahl, alcohol tended to ignite her. She often flew into rages. And of course, Hartman was the lone target. Omdahl really wanted her own career, so when she and Hartman had kids, it put a wrench in her plans. Their son was born in 1989, and then their daughter came 3 years later. Omdahl had her hands full. She was taking acting lessons, raising 2 kids, and all while watching her husband have what she so desperately wanted, fame. There was something else wrong with the marriage. It turned out that Phil Hartman had a disturbing pattern in relationships. At first, he was very emotional with the new person. After some time, however, Hartman tended to retract into himself. The problem this time around was that Omdahl was already unstable, so Hartman's withdrawal from her had a more sinister effect. Another pattern that Hartman had with his wives was how he argued. Apparently, in the middle of an argument, Hartman would do something bizarre. Go to sleep. Hartman said he did this to let his wife calm down. But you can imagine the frustration. You're in the middle of an argument, and your partner decides to take a nap. You'll soon see how this habit would prove to be fatal for Hartman. One example of Omdahl's instability was when the couple received a "congratulations on the new baby" card after the birth of their son, Sean. The problem wasn't the card, it was who it was from. Hartman's ex-wife. Omdahl was soon writing a letter of her own back to Strain. In the letter, she told her to stay away from her family forever, and if she didn't stay away, she would really be sorry. While Hartman and Amdahl were working on their marriage, he was finding great success with SNL. Two of his most audience-pleasing characters were Eugene, the anal-retentive chef, and unfrozen caveman lawyer. It was, however, his impersonations that fans really enjoyed. He had a long list that he could do really well. This included Charlton Heston, Phil Donahue, and even Barbara Bush. But there was one, however, that got him into a bit of trouble. One of Hartman's impressions for SNL was then U.S. President Bill Clinton. Let's just say that Hartman's impression was not all that kind to the president. In 1993, Hartman happened to meet Clinton, and Hartman felt a little guilty. He humorously told Clinton, "I guess I owe you a few apologies." Clinton didn't seem to be too bothered by Hartman's impressions, and later even sent him a signed photograph. It was hard to be mad at Hartman. He was such a decent guy. While working on SNL, Phil Hartman received the nickname Glue. Lorne Michaels explained that the nickname was because Hartman sort of held the show together. He was helpful and gave a lot to his fellow cast members. Eventually, Hartman wanted Emmy for his writing on SNL and received a nomination for his performance. Hartman was loved by all, but his wife clearly wasn't happy about it. Hartman's wife was not just a model, but an actor too, or at least she wanted to be. You can imagine how tough it would be trying to get famous while married to someone who's already successful. This would be especially true when your only credits were a waitress in a movie and 2 episodes of Third Rock from the Sun. Amdahl wanted to be famous, and watching her successful husband was like putting salt in a wound. Hartman stayed with SNL, even as his favorite castmates left. The show's creator, Lorne Michaels, kept Hartman on the show by making him a huge promise. He told him that if he stayed for another year, he'd give him his own show. This is exactly what Hartman wanted. What Hartman envisioned was an old-time variety show. When Phil Hartman was ready to leave SNL and start The Phil Show, NBC suddenly got cold feet. They didn't think a variety show would appeal to a young audience. He later confessed that it was a relief. He could see how much work the show would have been, and that it would have been difficult to make it to his standards. Hartman was through with Saturday Night Live, and it was time to move on to the next phase of his life. He soon hit Los Angeles and found work on Fox's The Simpsons. They brought him in for a 1-episode part during the 2nd season, and Hartman ended up doing a total of 52 episodes. His most famous character was certainly Troy McClure, a fictional has-been actor who has to perform degrading infomercials and educational videos. It seemed that wherever Hartman worked, the people there wanted to keep him around. Obviously, NBC still owed Hartman something after not going through with their promise for a variety show. Their offer was a part on News Radio, which was an ensemble sitcom set at a radio station. Hartman's Bill McNeil was a standout character, and Hartman joked that he's basically playing himself minus any ethics. Hartman had made a successful transition from New York to L.A. But what about his wife? Was she finding any success as well? A move to sunny California should have brightened the mood in the Hartman home. Sadly, nothing could be further from the truth. Amdahl was still tired of living in the shadow of her famous husband, and having kids had not settled her. She was now using both alcohol and narcotics. At times, Hartman became concerned for her children's safety. Amdahl was losing her cool on many occasions, so Hartman would take the kids to a friend's place for their own safety. But it wasn't just the kids that needed protection. Since they'd moved to L.A., Amdahl had been afraid for her and her family's safety. Maybe she was used to the hustle of New York and found it strange to be in a big house, often alone with the kids. To remedy her fears, Amdahl wanted some protection, so she bought a gun. A friend who likely knew about Amdahl's anger management issues begged her to get rid of it, but she refused. It seemed like a bad idea for someone with a bad temper to have something like that close at hand. While Hartman's career was going well, his home life clearly was not. Co-workers started to notice something shocking. Hartman was showing up at work with visible scratches on his face. Most people knew that Omdahl had a temper, so they assumed it was her who had scratched him. Some nights, Hartman would avoid his home and his wife and sleep in the safety of his houseboat. What Hartman needed was someone to talk to about his problems at home. One of Hartman's co-stars on news radio was Joe Rogan, who later became the host of the Joe Rogan Experience. Hartman opened up to Rogan about what was going on with his wife back at home. Rogan, after hearing about Omdahl's behavior, had one thing to say: divorce her immediately. He apparently told him this at least 5 times over. Hartman said he couldn't leave her. He stayed with Omdahl for the sake of his kids. A decision he wouldn't live long enough to regret. Amongst the other cast members he stayed friends with, Hartman had remained close to his ex-SNL scene partner, Jan Hooks. Omdahl started looking at her husband's relationship with Hooks suspiciously. She would sometimes joke that it was like Hartman was married to Hooks and not her. While these comments came off as jokes, it appears they were more deeply rooted than just jabs. On the night of May 27, 1998, Omdahl was having an intimate Italian dinner with her friend Christy and Xander, who had worked as a writer for SNL. Xander later said that Omdahl seemed to be fine. Yes, they'd had a couple of drinks, but she was in a good frame of mind. When Omdahl got home to Hartman, however, that frame of mind turned dark. When Omdahl got home, she and Hartman got into a terrible fight. It's not clear when they stopped arguing, but Hartman did his usual thing and went to bed in the middle of the fight. Omdahl had some time to brood, and she also drank more and took some illicit substances. Omdahl grabbed her pistol and entered their bedroom, where Hartman was fast asleep. Omdahl was obviously in a very agitated state. From outside their bedroom, 3 loud shots rang into their large home. The children were fast asleep and luckily didn't hear anything. When Omdahl saw what she'd done, she was at a loss. She spent another hour drinking and wondering what she should do next. Distraught, she decided to call her friend Ron Douglas. When she got a hold of Douglas on the phone, Omdahl made up a story. She said that Hartman wasn't home. According to her, he left her a note, which said that he was out for the evening. Omdahl was already concocting a story to explain what had happened and creating an alibi. Douglas just told her to calm down and go sleep it off. Omdahl then left her sleeping kids in the house, got into her car, and headed to Douglas's home. Once she'd recovered, she told Douglas the horrible truth. She'd shot Hartman. Likely Douglas had seen her in an agitated state before, so he didn't believe her. When she showed him the weapon, Douglas still was unconvinced. He looked down into the chamber, and whatever he saw made him think that she was lying. For some reason, Douglas hung on to his belief that Omdahl was lying or mistaken about what she'd done. Just to be on the safe side, he took her pistol and put it into a plastic bag. When her head was clear enough to drive, he asked her to go home. Omdahl agreed on one condition, that he'd drive in his car behind her. Douglas agreed, and the two set off for the Hartman household. Omdahl knew what they would find there, but Douglas had no idea. When Omdahl arrived at the house, she and Douglas entered. Douglas, who'd been so sure that Omdahl was lying, finally saw the horrible truth with his own 2 eyes. He saw that Omdahl had shot Hartman 3 times. Douglas finally realized it was time to call for help. While he was looking for the landline, Omdahl locked herself in the bedroom with Hartman's body. Once Douglas had called for help, he realized he needed to do something about the children, who were still asleep in their beds. He grabbed their son, who was 9 years old at the time, and took him outside. By this time, the officers were already there. He gave their son to the officers and also handed over Omdahl's weapon. Another officer went in and got the couple's daughter, who was just 6 years old. At that moment, everyone heard a loud bang come from the bedroom where Omdahl was with Hartman's body. While in the bedroom with her husband's body, Omdahl had gotten a hold of another pistol. She spoke to her sister on the phone for a short time. The loud bang that Douglas the officers, and probably the children had heard was Omdal taking her own life. 2 children lost both their parents that night, and the world lost a great comedian. Of course, once everyone had taken in the tragedy, twisted rumors began to emerge. Neighbors said that they knew the couple had problems. Likely they could hear the screaming matches. Actor Steve Guttenberg had the opposite impression. He said they had the appearance of being well-balanced. It came out later that Omdal had been using a medication called Zoloft, partnered with alcohol and other things. This information prompted Omdal's brother Gregory to launch a lawsuit for wrongful death. Gregory's lawsuit was against Pfizer, the company who made Zoloft. Well, this was going on. There was another squabble about Hartman. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a FactorNape member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. Jon Lovitz, an SNL colleague and friend of Hartman's, had someone he wanted to blame for Hartman's early demise. It was Hartman's co-star on news radio, Andy Dick. Lovitz said that Andy had gotten Omdal back into recreational drug use, even though she'd already had a history of misusing them. He had apparently reintroduced Omdal to illicit substances, and the two had used them together. So what did Andy Dick have to say about this accusation? Andy did not deny using with Omdal. What he did deny was something else. He said he had no idea about Omdal's history of substance use. Lovitz took a while, but he eventually admitted that maybe Andy Dick wasn't to blame. Andy, however, wasn't about to let it go. When he saw Lovitz at an LA restaurant in 2006, he said these words to Lovitz, "I put the Phil Hartman hex on you. You're the next one to die." Lovitz had him removed from the restaurant. The next year, 2007, Lovitz ran into Andy Dick at the comedy club, the Laugh Factory. The two men soon got into a heated argument, arguing about Hartman. Andy Dick was continuing to say that he was not responsible for Hartman's demise. Lovitz wasn't buying it, and he finally took out his anger over losing his friend. He ended up taking Andy Dick's head and banging it against the bar. The real victims, and all of this, of course, are Hartman's and Omdal's children. Omdal's sister, Catherine, and her husband, Mike Wright, stepped up and took over raising the children. Luckily, they lived far from the paparazzi of Hollywood in Wisconsin. And the kids didn't need to worry about money, as Hartman had taken great care with his will. But it wasn't really about the money. What about the kids' mental health? It may be because of all the media around his parents' passing, but the adult, Sean Hartman, their son, has kept himself completely out of the spotlight. All we know about him is that he lives in Oakland, California, and he, like his father, is a visual artist and also a musician. Their daughter has grown into a stunning beauty. According to her Instagram account, Toronto is her favorite city, and she had a spectacular wedding in Italy. Luckily, after all that trauma, it seems that the kids have done all right. If you enjoyed this Fact and 8 video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.